one of those lucky people that can travel anywhere.
Yes, ma'am, I know.
And they sometimes call you nomads.
Chick, je te préviens, tu vas pas recommencer tes conneries, hein?
Mais non, je vais rien lui faire.
Hello and welcome to your weekly film show here on Encore. As of Wednesday, French cinemas are expanding capacity from 35 to 65% as the COVID situation improves here. To tell us more about what's on the big screen, France 24's film critic Lisa Nesselson joins me virtually. Lisa, you're starting with a film that swept up trophies during awards season. Nomadland is an American drama starring Frances McDormand, directed by Chinese filmmaker Chloé Zhao. Is this as good as its 3 Oscars and Golden Lion from Venice suggest?
Well, Nomadland is a small, carefully made, occasionally touching movie. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But if I were a member of the Academy, well, it wouldn't have been my top choice for any of the Oscars it won. Frances McDormand anchors the film as Fern, a widow who leaves the now desolate former company town of Empire, Nevada, where she had lived happily with her late husband, and takes up life as an itinerant so-called nomad, living in her van and taking seasonal jobs to cover food and gas, but not earning enough to cover urgent van repairs or to rebuild a middle-class life. While McDormand is always excellent in any role she tackles, I would have voted for Andra Day for her astonishing performance as Billie Holiday. Nomadland paints the peripatetic life of self-reliance as mostly positive, and using non-actors who are both endearing and convincing, folds Fern's lingering grief into a rambling portrait of ordinary Americans who have worked hard all their lives and seem to willingly go with the flow, aware that while they'll see many a rustic sunset, they're unlikely to get a financial break between now and the grave.
All right, let's take a look at the travels of Fern, who sets out to find company on the road in Nomadland.
One of the things I love most about this life is that there's no final goodbye. I've met hundreds of people out here, and I don't ever say a final goodbye. Let's just say I'll see you down the road. And I do. I see them again. And I can be certain in my heart, I'll see you again.
Lisa, how do you feel about when a film gets so much acclaim? Can anything live up to those sorts of expectations?
You raise a fascinating point. In an ideal world, nominations and prizes call attention to movies that people should see because they have above-average artistic merit and hopefully entertain. Personal taste is always part of the equation, which it certainly should be. Nomadland does what it set out to do, but for me, Sacha Baron Cohen's Borat subsequent movie film is a far more wrenching and infinitely funnier semi-documentary look at ordinary Americans. 2 very different approaches to portraying contemporary American life, incorporating real people. Chloé Zhao, who edited Nomadland in addition to writing and directing, is very talented. And we're going to be seeing films by her, I'm sure, for as long as she wants to keep making them.
Now, Lisa, I think we can all agree that actor Pierre Deladonchamp looks like an angel. So what's he doing in a French film called Vaurien, which means rascal?
Well, Deladonchamp has an incredible range. He got caught up in the off-kilter activities on a beach for gay men with a killer on the loose in Stranger by the Lake. He played the family friend performing pedophile acts with impunity in the award-winning Little Tickles. And here he looks like an angel, but we would be more likely to pass an audition as the angel of death. Jay is a drifter whose sinister nature isn't immediately apparent. When we meet him, he has just been released from prison and is penniless. He talks his way out of a fine on a train for riding without a ticket. He has an incredibly assured knack for claiming, just helping himself to what he considers to be his due in any situation. If he needs a bicycle, he'll steal one. If he wants to give a girl a piece of jewelry, he might steal the original owner's vital signs along with the ring. He's riveting to watch from a distance. You would not want to meet Jay in a dark alley or in a perfectly lit art gallery.
Okay, here's a glimpse of the atmosphere in Rascal.
T'as quelle vie, toi? Je te connais, toi.
Chez toi, c'est chez les autres?
Y a personne chez toi?
Je te connais.
Je crois pas, non. Moi, je vais dormir avec toi.
Toi, tu veux pas dormir avec moi, tu veux coucher avec moi.
Il y a plein de filles avec qui j'ai envie de coucher. Mais il y en a qu'une avec qui j'ai envie de dormir.
Tu sais où tu veux aller? C'est ce que tu veux faire? C'est moi, ça?
Je sais qui t'es.
This film has a very interesting role for Ophélie Bao, who made her mark in Abdelatif Keshish's 2 installments of a projected trilogy called Mektoub, My Love. In those 2 films, the second one was shown in Cannes in 2019, prompting plenty of walkouts, and it has never been released in theaters. It was difficult for me to decide whether she had genuine acting talent or was simply willing to put her own body on the line in some lengthy and explicit sex scenes for Keshish's camera. But her role here as Maya, a student who lives in a squat and starts an affair with Jay, makes it quite clear that she's very much a real actress. This film is not for the squeamish, but it's very good.
Out in France on June 10th is the French translation of a book called The Big Goodbye. It's the story of the making of the film called Chinatown from a script that some believe is the most perfect screenplay ever written. Lisa, does one movie really warrant 397 pages?
And a mere 362 pages in translation. In a word, yes. As I turned the last page, I didn't want to say goodbye to The Big Goodbye. Author and master researcher Sam Wasson has written several deep dives into film, including his charming, far slimmer volume, Fifth Avenue, 5 a.m., Audrey Hepburn, Breakfast at Tiffany's, and the Dawn of the Modern Woman. The Big Goodbye describes Hollywood at a crossroads in the early 1970s. The underlying thesis is that Chinatown was the last major Hollywood film where the film itself, making art, telling a human story for grown-up audiences, was more important than the deal. After that, the studios, which had been run by people who loved movies and wanted to make good ones, were increasingly bought and run by huge firms that couldn't care less about anything except money, and so were more concerned with how they'd market the movie than the movie itself.
So what do we learn from the book?
Well, you'll learn a lot about how the movie gets put together. Pre-production, the actual shoot, and post-production. Wasson gets inside the head of screenwriter Robert Towne as he wrestles with crafting the script from scratch as a broken-hearted Valentine to a vanishing Los Angeles. The book provides fascinating details on how rigorous location design or casting decisions amplify or hinder the intent of the script, and how director Roman Polanski's personal history, his mother's death in Auschwitz, his pregnant wife Sharon Tate's death at the hands of followers of Charlie Manson, couldn't help but color his storytelling on screen. It's a story of friendship with Robert Towne, who became wrecked with cocaine abuse, of Robert Evans, the producer, who was head of production at Paramount, also produced Rosemary's Baby, Love Story, and The Godfather, of Jack Nicholson, whose code of personal honor is kind of thrilling, a code of honor concerning other men, not necessarily the women in his life, of how Faye Dunaway was a handful to direct but gave a stupendous performance. Chinatown not only stands the test of time, I think it's more rewarding on each viewing. This book helps explain how conscientious craft and last-minute decisions can be equally powerful influences on making a masterwork. It's a fascinating and ultimately heartbreaking story about making great art against the odds. I enthusiastically suggest that you read the book, but Ben Affleck is currently adapting it for the screen. So you can also wait for the movie based on the book about making a movie.
And finally, after multiple delays due to the pandemic, an Oscar-winning film starring Riz Ahmed is being released here in France. Tell us about The Sounds of Metal.
Well, one of the hardest things to do on film is put viewers in the head of an artist. Two of the best examples I know until now are Agnès Varda's Jaco de Nantes, about how her husband Jacques Demy grew up to become a distinctive filmmaker, and Andrei Konchalovsky's Sin, currently showing in France as Michel Ange, about the incredible struggles of Michelangelo to deploy his genius for carving marble while not antagonizing his patrons. Beethoven went deaf Degas went blind. In Sound of Metal, British actor Riz Ahmed is perfectly cast as an American drummer who loves drumming. The physicality of it and the wild abandon of the controlled noise help him to stay sober. And then, pretty much from one day to the next, his hearing becomes fuzzy and unreliable, kind of like talking on a phone underwater and then dropping the phone. It's very unnerving for him as a character and for us as viewers because the sound design is immersively brilliant. This is an urgent, intricate tale with a few standout performances. It didn't completely convince me through the conclusion, but I admire the way this film shows us what it must be like, what it must feel like to be going deaf, and how losing one of your senses, possibly the most important one to a musician, makes a lot of important decisions imperative in a short stretch of time.
All right, Lisa, we'll be ending on a clip of Sound of Metal. Thank you so much for your wrap of film news, and thank you so much for watching. Remember, our website, we're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
It's time, I gotta do something.
How'd you get the money? The world can be a damn cruel place.
I was trying to save my life.
I wonder, have you had any moments of stillness? For me, those moments, that place, will never abandon you.
10 years after the 2011 uprising in Idlib, what has become of the prisoners of Bashar al-Assad's regime?
Kept searching. Every time I was told he could be in another place. I went to Sednaya once.
How can you cling on to hope when there are no signs of life? Photographs by a Syrian soldier called Cesar should at least make it possible to identify the dead.